PMO ordered extra bond sales just before Karnataka state elections. 6 freaking years was just required to state the electoral bonds as unconstitutional. It was ADR's 4th application for the stay of electoral bonds. 6,500 crores in anonymous donations. PMO's direct criminality was proved when evidence came out. 99% of the bonds were just of rupees 10 lakh and 1 crore denominations. Finance Ministry silently amended the Electoral Bond Scheme. World's largest democracy was just endorsing the most corrupt political funding system. What if I told you, if possible, India's democracy will never die in a situation of emergency or a military coup, but will be systematically getting murdered through legal documents, judicial silence and bureaucratic amendments while 1.4 billion citizens remained completely unaware. This is not a thing of future. It already happened right under our noses just because the credible folks were fighting with full force to make the system more opaque and the constitutional warriors were fighting with the constitution in hand to make the system more transparent. While we the citizens were just scrolling through Instagram or Facebook, democracy was dying in the corridors of the Supreme Court. ADR petitioners requested a stay against the Electoral Bond Scheme in the light of the upcoming state elections of West Bengal, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Puducherry and Assam. This was not just their first attempt, it was their 4th attempt for the stay in the scheme of the electoral bonds. 6,500 crores in anonymous donations flowed to political parties from 2017 to 2021, in which BJP topped the list. This was just the tip of the iceberg. ADR has collected so much amount of evidences that it should have triggered a constitutional emergency. Point number 1, RTI documents proving Prime Minister's office ordered extra bond sales just before Karnataka elections. Point number 2, the entire foundation was just a lie. Finance Ministry's own RTI response admitted no donors ever asked for anonymity. Point number 3, every institution warned against this scheme. RBI, Election Commission, Law Ministry, everybody was silenced. Point number 4, BJP just received over 65% of electoral bonds donations. And point number 5, 99% of the bonds sold were of 10 lakh and rupees 1 crore denominations. Just think about a scenario. Will your neighborhood uncle ever buy rupees 1 crore political donations and donate it to any of the political parties? Exactly not. Who does it then? Big corporate houses for a say in the policy making and policy change. When Supreme Court saw all the evidences, what did they say? Then Chief Justice S.A. Bobde, Justice A.S. Bopanna, Justice V. Ramasubramaniam just dismissed the stay as requested by ADR and Common Cause on the Electoral Bond Scheme. The Supreme Court did not just dismiss the case, they also explained that there cannot be repeated applications seeking the same relief. But what happened in November 2022 just exposed the true purpose of the Electoral Bond Scheme. Finance Ministry quietly amended the Electoral Bond Scheme not to fix corruption, but to institutionalize it more efficiently. The Finance Ministry just introduced a mere paragraph to the 2018 Electoral Bond Scheme so that in a year of state or general elections, electoral bonds could be sold for another 15 days in addition to the 4 15-day windows for extra sale. No parliamentary debate, no discussion, just a silent notification. Mind it, this single amendment was just a confession of the true purpose of the electoral bonds, which said electoral bonds were purposely designed to rig elections through timed corporate bribery. Here's how the system works. Step 1, elections are announced. Step 2, government immediately amends electoral bond scheme and then the corporate donors gets few days notice to buy political influence, and last of all, elections are held with pre-purchased outcomes. So everything sums up to ruling party will always have the freedom to schedule when corporate donations will flow. They can schedule time bond sales for their campaign needs while starving opposition completely of funding. This was never about electoral competition or transparent political funding. It was just about rigging elections through financial weapon control. The scale of this systematic fraud will just blow up your mind. On 15th November 2022, ADR filed an additional affidavit stating that the amendment had been made to ensure that donations increased around election season. On 1st December 2022, they also filed a supplementary affidavit adding a point that the amendment was introduced while the Model Code of Conduct was in force for the 2022 Assembly elections in Gujarat and Himachal Pradesh. The affidavit contained a number of rupees 10,246 crore rupees. That was the amount which the political parties received in anonymous political donations through Electoral Bond Scheme. 90% of these bonds which were sold were of rupees 1 crore denominations. Corporate houses were buying these types of electoral bonds just like regular office supplies. Electoral bonds systematically assassinated voters' fundamental right to know who is buying their government. That led to the violation of Article 19(1)(a), which ultimately led to the demise of the Electoral Bond Scheme and made it unconstitutional. While this systematic fraud was happening, the world was watching India's democracy collapse in real time. International democracy watchdogs were documenting India's constitutional collapse. Carnage endowment called electoral bonds legitimized opacity, proving Indian institutions were completely unable or just unwilling to effect change. World's largest democracy was endorsing world's most corrupt election funding system, whereas other countries worldwide were busy strengthening their democracy. Just imagine a bizarre scenario. A company worth rupees 1 lakh is donating rupees 1 crore. A company who is in loss-making state are donating crores and crores of electoral bonds. Is this just political worship, or financial impossibility, or systematic money laundering vehicle mowing the roots of democracy? Now just picture this. The Supreme Court of India is packed. 7 petitions have been filed challenging not just one but 3 major aspects of political funding in India. Number 1, the Electoral Bond Scheme itself. Number 2, bringing political parties under the Right to Information Act, and last of all, allowing political parties to receive foreign funding. But here's where it gets interesting. Chief Justice D.Y. Chandrachud realizes that this case is so important, so complex, that it needs to be heard by a 5 full-judge constitutional bench, and also the court bifurcated these cases in the interest of ease and clarity in hearings. The main question that arises through so much rulings is that why would the most transparent electoral funding system would have to go through a series of so much judicial scrutiny? Well, to understand that, we need to go forward to October 31st, 2023, when the real drama began. The star of the show, Advocate Prashant Bhushan, representing the Association for Democratic Reforms. And from the very first argument, he launched a precise attack on the Electoral Bond Scheme. His opening statement was simple but devastating. Democracy cannot function unless the voters have all the necessary information about the parties for whom they are going to vote. Prashant Bhushan also revealed something that will make your blood boil. Out of 23 lakh registered companies in India, if you wanted to find out who was funding your favorite political party, you would have to manually check through all of them. Can you just imagine? Just answer my one sincere question. Would you go through all the records of 23 lakh companies completely to know who is funding whom? Obviously no will be your answer. The real bombshell was yet to come. While you and I were completely kept in dark about who is politically funding whom, just have a guess who had access to all this information. Exactly the State Bank of India and other law enforcement agencies. Exactly, did you just notice what this situation meant? The ruling government can easily pressurize the SBI to have all the information about who is funding the opposition. But the opposition and the simple people like us will not have any resource to find out who is funding the ruling government. Senior advocate Kapil Sibal made an even more shocking revelation. He said, and I quote, "Let's talk practical politics. Any corporation that makes a sizable donation will themselves disclose the information to the political party in return for favors. Therefore, the so-called anonymity was only anonymous to the public. The political parties themselves exactly knew who was funding whom." But the point where it gets more outrageous for us is the situation where the Chief Justice himself pointed out that these bonds could be traded like currency. Person A buys the bond, gives it to person B, who then gives it to person C, who then finally gives it to the political party. Bonds channeled in mainstream in such a way that they act as mere currencies, between political parties and the big corporate houses and the donors. So please make me understand that what is this kind of transparency where government and the opposition and all the ruling parties will know who is funding their businesses, but we the public will have complete anonymity about who is funding whom. And just wait for it, here comes the most damaging part of the entire case. The Association for Democratic Reforms presented a report that showed 94.25% of all electoral bonds purchased were worth rupees 1 crore. But here's where Chief Justice Chandrachud delivered the knockout punch. He said, a party in power is in a much more vantage position to secure greater amount of funding through electoral bonds because of its ability to dole out quid pro quo in the form of government contracts, leases, licenses, concessions or policy changes. Through this statement, Chief Justice of India D.Y. Chandrachud confirmed the fact that political parties are just getting donations to stay in power so that they can help their buddies and donors. Actually, before Electoral Bond Scheme, the companies were only allowed to donate 7.5% of their annual profits to political parties and also disclose it publicly. But after the electoral bonds, no upper limits and no disclosures. Did you also dream of the same India where the people and their will goes into trashes and only the power and the money of the corporate houses will decide elections? I don't think so. Now, for a well-formed opinion, let's also look at the government side of what the Solicitor General Tushar Mehta said and argued in the court for this case. Solicitor General Tushar Mehta made some interesting points. He said, and I am paraphrasing, look, every government since 1956 has tried to solve the black money problem in political funding. Electoral bonds were just another attempt. He took the court through a detailed timeline. 1969, corporate political funding was banned. Result, briefcase politics and more black money. 1985, corporate funding was allowed, again, but with limits. 2003, all limits removed, but disclosures were required. 2018, electoral bonds introduced for confidentiality. Mehta's argument was simple. If we don't protect donor confidentiality, donors will be afraid of victimization from parties they don't fund and they will go back to using black money. Sounds completely reasonable, right? But the court argued against this statement. The court said, and I quote, if confidentiality is so important, then why can the ruling party access all this information through law enforcement agencies and also through SBI? Mehta's response, they would need a court order to disclose all the information. Absurd? But as Kapil Sibal brilliantly pointed out, to file a case alleging corruption, we first need access to the data. Without the data, how can we even approach the court for an order? It's just like saying, to prove someone stole from your house, first prove someone actually stole from your house. Circular logic, friends. After 3 days of intense arguments, on November 2nd, 2023, the Supreme Court of India reserved its judgment. And then came February 15th, 2024, a date that went down in Indian constitutional history. The 5-judge constitutional bench, led by Chief Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, delivered a unanimous verdict that struck down the entire electoral bond scheme, stating the scheme as completely unconstitutional. In simple words, the Supreme Court said this scheme violates the citizens' right to information and under Article 19(1)(a) and creates an unequal playing field in democracy. This was not just a legal victory for ADR or other organizations who were involved in this case against the government, but this was a victory for every Indian who believed that their democracy should be transparent, their democracy should be fair, and the government should always be credible about each and every details. You will be completely amazed after you learn that Supreme Court of India directed the SBI to completely disclose all the information regarding the electoral bond scheme to the Election Commission of India. And what exactly the revelations that came out? They were exactly what the petitioners had predicted. approximately 16,518 crores of anonymous funding in the form of electoral bonds. If you have seriously reached till the very end of this video, please consider giving a like. I would love to see 1000 likes on this video. Subscribe to my channel and also comment down your thoughts below. And also don't forget to share it with others.